This meeting is for family only, Uncle Richard sneered, his expensive suit failing to hide his growing paunch as he blocked the doorway to the conference room. You're not welcome here, Alex. I stood in the marble-floored hallway of Morrison Associates, the law firm that had handled my grandfather's affairs for 4 decades, facing the man who'd spent years trying to convince everyone I wasn't really part of the family. Behind him, I could see my cousins and their spouses gathering for the will reading, all of them pointedly avoiding eye contact. Actually, I replied calmly, Mr. Morrison specifically asked me to be here. Of course he did, Richard scoffed. You probably begged him, hoping Grandpa left you some scraps out of pity. But we all know you stopped being family when you abandoned the company. Abandoned. That's what they called my decision to get an MBA instead of accepting the entry-level position Richard had offered me at Morrison Manufacturing 5 years ago. A position that would have kept me firmly under his thumb, just like my cousins. Richard, James Morrison's voice cut through the tension. The elderly lawyer appeared in the doorway, his silver hair and impeccable suit a stark contrast to Richard's red-faced hostility. Please take your seat, we're about to begin. James, you can't be serious, Richard protested. This ungrateful brat turned his back on everything Grandpa built. He has no right to be here. Mr. Morrison's expression remained professionally neutral, but I caught a slight twinkle in his eye. Nevertheless, Alexander's presence is required. Now, shall we proceed? I'm Alexander Chen, 28 years old, and until this moment, my family thought I was nothing more than a disappointment, the grandson who'd rejected his birthright to pursue his own path. What they didn't know was that my path had been carefully planned with the help of the man they were all gathered to remember. As I took a seat at the far end of the conference table, I felt the weight of hostile stares from my relatives. Aunt Patricia, Richard's wife, whispered something to my cousin Michael, who smirked in my direction. My other cousins, Jennifer and David, were too busy checking their phones to acknowledge my presence. Only my cousin Emma offered a small, hesitant smile before her father, Richard, shot her a warning glance. Now that everyone is here, Mr. Morrison began, opening an elegant leather portfolio, we can proceed with the reading of Harold Chen's last will and testament. I thought about my grandfather, who had passed away 2 weeks ago at the age of 82. To the world, he had been Harold Chen, founder and CEO of Morrison Manufacturing, a self-made success story who built a small machine shop into a $500 million company. To me, he had been much more, a mentor, a confidant, and the architect of a plan that was about to shock everyone in this room. Mr. Morrison cleared his throat and began reading. The initial bequests were exactly what everyone expected: personal items, family heirlooms, and monetary gifts distributed among the family members. Richard nodded approvingly as his children received their shares, while pointedly glancing in my direction when my name wasn't mentioned. And now, Mr. Morrison continued, we come to the matter of Morrison Manufacturing. The room grew silent. This was what they had all been waiting for. Richard sat up straighter, adjusting his tie with an air of anticipation. For years, he had been telling anyone who would listen that he was the natural successor to lead the company. Regarding the ownership and management of Morrison Manufacturing, Mr. Morrison read, I, Harold Chen, having full faculty of my mental capacities, hereby declare that effective immediately upon my death, all shares and controlling interest in the company shall transfer to. Richard was already half rising from his chair, a triumphant smile spreading across his face. Phoenix Holdings LLC. The silence in the room suddenly took on a different quality. Richard's smile froze. What? He sputtered. What is Phoenix Holdings? James, what is this nonsense? Mr. Morrison continued as if he hadn't been interrupted. Furthermore, I hereby announce that Phoenix Holdings LLC, now the parent company of Morrison Manufacturing, has appointed its CEO as the new Chief Executive Officer of Morrison Manufacturing, effective immediately. Richard's face had turned an alarming shade of red. This is outrageous. Who owns this Phoenix Holdings? Some corporate raiders? Did they pressure Dad into this? I'll fight this in court. Mr. Morrison finally looked up from his papers, that same twinkle in his eye. Actually, Richard, I believe you already know the CEO of Phoenix Holdings. He turned to me. Alex, would you like to explain? The room fell silent as every head turned toward me. I stood slowly, straightening my own carefully chosen suit. Phoenix Holdings LLC was established 3 years ago, I said, my voice steady. Grandpa and I founded it together while I was getting my MBA. He transferred his controlling interest in Morrison Manufacturing to Phoenix Holdings 2 years ago, making me the de facto owner of the company. The explosion was immediate. Richard leapt to his feet, knocking his chair backward. This is impossible. A trick. Dad would never. It's all perfectly legal. Mr. Morrison interrupted, producing another document. Harold and Alex planned this transition meticulously, while you were all focused on your positions within Morrison Manufacturing. Alex was learning how to lead it. My cousins stared at me in shock. Jennifer had finally looked up from her phone. David's mouth hung open. Emma's small smile had grown slightly wider. Those consulting jobs, Michael said slowly, the ones you took during business school. I nodded. I was actually analyzing different divisions of Morrison Manufacturing, identifying areas for improvement. Grandpa received all my reports. The European expansion plan, Jennifer whispered. That was you? Yes, I confirmed. Along with the sustainability initiative and the new automation project, I've been helping run the company from the outside for the past 2 years. Richard slammed his hand on the table. This is a betrayal. Dad promised me I would take over. I've given 30 years to this company. And in those 30 years, I replied calmly, what has actually improved under your leadership? Our market share has dropped 15%. Employee turnover is at an all-time high. The only thing that's grown is your salary. How dare you? Grandpa dared. I cut him off. He saw what was happening to his life's work. That's why he approached me 5 years ago, after you tried to force me into that entry-level position. He knew the company needed fresh perspective, not just another yes man. Mr. Morrison produced more documents. I have here the full transfer of ownership records, board approvals, and Harold's personal letter explaining his decision. Would anyone like to review them? Richard was still sputtering, but Patricia touched his arm, shaking her head slightly. She, at least, seemed to recognize the futility of fighting this. There's more, I added, opening my own portfolio. Grandpa left instructions about the current management structure. I looked directly at Richard. You're being offered early retirement, effective immediately. Your severance package is quite generous. You can't fire me. I'm your uncle. I'm not firing you. I'm offering you a choice. You can retire with a full pension and benefits, or we can discuss your performance record in detail, including the Jensen contract and the missing inventory from last quarter. Richard's face went from red to white. Behind him, Patricia's eyes narrowed. They both knew exactly what I was referring to. Of course, I continued, this offer extends only to you, Michael, Jennifer, David. Your positions are secure, assuming you want to stay, though you'll be reporting to your new department heads, not to each other. My cousins exchanged glances, a mixture of relief and uncertainty on their faces. They had grown up in their father's shadow, never allowed to develop their own capabilities. Maybe now they would have the chance. Emma, I turned to my youngest cousin, who had always been different from her siblings. I'd like you to head our new innovation division, if you're interested. Grandpa always said you had the most potential, but Richard kept you in accounting. Emma's face lit up, while Richard looked like he might explode. Before he could speak, Mr. Morrison interrupted again. There are several more documents to review, he said. Alex, would you like to continue this meeting in your office, the one that was previously your grandfather's? I nodded, gathering my papers. Please have security escort Richard out after he signs the retirement papers. Everyone else, we'll meet tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. to discuss the reorganization. As I walked toward the door, Richard finally found his voice again. This isn't over, he growled. You can't just walk in here and take everything. I turned back one last time. I didn't take anything, Uncle Richard. I earned it, the same way Grandpa did, through hard work, innovation, and understanding that a company is more than just a source of personal profit. The only difference is, I did it without anyone knowing. I left them there, walking through the familiar halls of Morrison Associates toward my waiting car. My phone buzzed. A message from Emma. That was amazing. Richard is still having a meltdown. See you tomorrow, boss. I smiled, thinking about the changes to come. Grandpa had taught me that true leadership isn't about titles or corner offices. It's about vision. dedication, and the courage to do what's necessary, even when it means taking the harder path. The next morning, I arrived at Morrison Manufacturing headquarters at 7 a.m., using the key Grandpa had given me years ago. The early hour reminded me of the days I'd spent here as a teenager, learning every aspect of the business from the ground up while Richard and his children focused on their executive perks. The security guard, old Mr. Jenkins, didn't even blink when I walked in. "Morning, Alex," he said with a knowing smile. Or should I say, Mr. Chen now? "Alex is still fine, Mr. Jenkins," I replied. "You've known me since I was in high school." "Your grandpa would be proud," he said. "He always told me you were the one to watch." In my grandfather's, now my, office, everything was exactly as he had left it. The same photographs on the wall, the same worn leather chair, the same view of the manufacturing floor below. But there were changes coming, innovations that would honor his legacy while moving the company forward. I sat down at the desk, opening my laptop to review the messages that had already started flowing in. News of the ownership change had spread quickly through the industry. Our competitors were nervous, our partners curious, and our employees, well, that would depend on how I handled the next few weeks. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Emma stood there, an hour early for our meeting, clutching a thick folder. "I hope it's okay," she said, somewhat nervously. "I couldn't sleep last night, so I started working on some ideas for the innovation division." I gestured for her to sit. "I'm glad you're here early. There's something I want to show you." From my briefcase, I pulled out a familiar leather-bound notebook, my grandfather's journal. I opened it to a page he had shown me 3 years ago, where he had written his observations about each family member. "Read what he wrote about you," I said, passing it to her. Emma's eyes widened as she read. Emma has the same spark I saw in Alex, the ability to see beyond what is to what could be. Richard has buried her talent in numbers, but she dreams in innovations. She will be crucial to the company's future, once she's given the chance to spread her wings. Tears formed in her eyes. "He really wrote this?" "He did, and he was right. That's why I want you to be more than just the head of the innovation division. I want you to be my deputy CEO." She looked up, startled. "But I'm not ready. I don't have the experience." "Neither did I 3 years ago," I replied. "But Grandpa knew what he was doing. He saw the potential in both of us. Now it's time to prove him right." As Emma composed herself, wiping her eyes, another knock came at the door. Through the glass, I could see the rest of the management team gathering for our 9 a.m. meeting. It was time to begin the next chapter of Morrison Manufacturing. "Ready?" I asked Emma. She straightened her shoulders, tucking the journal carefully back into my briefcase. "Ready, boss." "Just Alex," I reminded her with a smile. "We're family, after all." Opening the door, I welcomed the team into what had been my grandfather's office for 40 years. Some faces were familiar, others new. All were watching me carefully, wondering what changes were coming. "Good morning, everyone," I began. "Let's talk about the future of Morrison Manufacturing." As I started my presentation, I caught a glimpse of my grandfather's photo on the wall behind me. He was smiling, that knowing smile of his, the one that had appeared every time he told me, "Patience, Alex, the best success stories are the ones no one sees coming." He had been right about that, as he had been right about so many things. The company he had built was about to evolve in ways Richard could never have imagined. And somewhere, I knew, Grandpa was watching, that knowing smile still on his face. The next few months were transformative for Morrison Manufacturing. The retirement of Richard and several of his closest allies cleared the way for fresh perspectives and new ideas. Emma's innovation division quickly became the talk of the industry, launching 3 new product lines in the first quarter alone. Michael, Jennifer, and David, freed from their father's oppressive management style, began to show promising signs of actual leadership potential. With proper mentoring and clear expectations, they started contributing meaningfully to their departments instead of just collecting paychecks. One afternoon, about 6 months after the will reading, Mr. Morrison stopped by my office for a casual visit. "Harold would be pleased," he said, looking around at the subtle changes I'd made to the office, including a wall now dedicated to showcasing employee innovations, though I suspect he knew exactly how this would play out. "Did he tell you the whole plan?" I asked. curious about how much my grandfather had shared with his old friend. James smiled. He told me enough. The day you turned down Richard's job offer, Harold called me. Laughing, he said, James, the boy finally showed his cards. He's ready. I thought about that day, how everyone had seen it as my greatest failure, while Grandpa had recognized it as the moment I proved I was worthy of his legacy. I miss him, I admitted. There are still days I want to ask his advice. He left you everything you need, James replied, tapping his temple, including the wisdom to know when to forge your own path. As if to prove his point, my phone buzzed with a message from our biggest client, confirming their approval of Emma's new design concept, a project that would double our annual revenue while setting new industry standards for sustainability. Speaking of forging paths, James continued, I heard Richard's been making noise about a wrongful termination lawsuit. I nodded, unconcerned. Let him try. We have documentation of every questionable decision he made in the past 5 years. He won't want that becoming public record. Very much your grandfather's grandson. James chuckled. He always said the best defense is having better receipts. After James left, I walked down to the manufacturing floor, something I'd made a habit of doing daily. Unlike Richard, who had rarely left his executive suite, I believed in maintaining a connection with every level of the company. The floor was humming with activity, but there was a different energy now. Gone was the tension that had characterized Richard's reign. In its place was a sense of purpose, of pride in the work being done. Near the new automated assembly line, one of our first major improvements, I spotted Emma leading a tour group from our latest potential partner. She was explaining the innovations we'd implemented, her enthusiasm evident even from a distance. Mr. Chen, a voice called out. It was Maria, one of our longest-serving line supervisors. Got a minute? I stopped to chat, listening as she explained an idea she had for improving the workflow. Under Richard, such suggestions from floor staff would have been ignored. Now, they were actively encouraged, with successful innovations earning bonuses and recognition. Write it up and send it to Emma's team, I told her. This is exactly the kind of thinking we need. As I headed back to my office, I reflected on how much had changed in 6 months. The company's stock price had risen 40%. Employee turnover had dropped to its lowest level in a decade. Our sustainability initiatives were earning industry awards. But the real victory wasn't in the numbers. It was in the transformation of a company culture from one of fear and stagnation to one of innovation and collaboration. It was in the pride I saw on employees' faces, the energy in our meetings, the flood of new ideas coming from all levels of the organization. My phone buzzed again, this time a message from Patricia, Richard's wife. After months of silence, she was reaching out. Alex, can we talk? Richard's not doing well. I considered ignoring it, but Grandpa's voice echoed in my head. Success without compassion is just another form of failure. Lunch tomorrow? I texted back. The usual place? Her response was immediate. Thank you. I put the phone away, turning my attention to the stack of proposals on my desk. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for now, I had work to do. After all, a legacy isn't just something you inherit, it's something you build on, one decision at a time. And somewhere, I knew, Grandpa was still watching, that knowing smile on his face, proud that his true successor had been hiding in plain sight all along.